Hunter. She's the chief economist at Aladdin Capital, and she joins us now on set. Constance, good to have you back with us.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How's Greece doing? I mean, is there no kind of turning back, no hope here left for Greece?
You know, this situation is so eerie. It reminds me almost exactly of 1998 with Russia. So Russia was in the same situation. Weren't they going to get their full IMF tranche? The IMF didn't give them the full tranche. They gave them a partial tranche, and then they just couldn't make it. They couldn't get the tax collection going. And that's really a problem you have in Greece. I mean, you hear it anecdotally, you hear it systematically, that they just don't have the tax collection. So whether it's the, Google Maps view of all the pools and only 5 pools are registered and there's really 1,000 of them, or whether it's the fact that you hear that doctors are underreporting their income and only something like 10% of doctors pay taxes because only 10% of doctors make enough money to pay taxes. I mean, so it's a systematic tax collection problem, and they haven't been able to right it. Just now, they're starting to rush and try to sell Greek assets. This isn't a rush job. First, the IMF has said they have to set up consultants, and they have a big problem, and I don't think they're going to be able to make it.
Whenever you hear a celebrity begging the media to leave him alone, or a company exec blaming speculators for the company problems, you know that it's pretty much the end of the story, right? So Papandreou has now done both. When will they default?
Well, it depends on if the ECB and the IMF come together and actually provide and actually organize a restructuring. And the irony here is the stakes are so high that they're actually almost getting in their own way because they're so nervous about making a wrong step. So the fear is that they get contagion and it moves to Ireland, Portugal, and the real big fear is Spain.
Well,
right?
We're hearing now the IMF is already willing to withhold its next chunk of aid for Greece, right? And we're hearing about other countries all week, the last 2 weeks, who've been saying, wait a second, we were going to give you this money, but forget it. I mean, isn't that in the end game?
That is the end game. We are in the end game, and I think the IMF is trying to get the Greeks to move faster, but the thing is they're moving as fast as they can. And this is, I'm not saying they don't have big structural reforms to do, but they really are moving as fast as they can at this point. So we're at the end game, exactly. Like either the ECB steps in and says we're going to organize a restructuring, or they keep insisting that they won't, and we get a default.
Is the market ready for how this is going to play out in your view?
Well, the actual numbers aren't that huge. I mean, if you look at the total U.S. bank exposure, for example, to Europe, it's something like $238 billion. That's not humongous. I mean, I'm talking about the periphery of Europe, right? Greek exposure is something like $18 billion. But it's the implication that a major European country has defaulted.
Right.
It's the implication that the ECB couldn't get it together to help them and come up with a workable solution. I mean, last year I was on your show saying it was a Band-Aid. And it's been a Band-Aid that's lasted a long time. A year is a long time, but I think we're at the end game.
So, all right, you're an economist, but you're at a fund, obviously, at Aladdin Capital here. So what do you do? What's the investment advice that comes out of this?
Well, the fallout's going to be in European equities. I think the fallout, to some extent, is going to be in the euro. I think the fallout is going to be certainly in the banks, the European banks, the credit of the European banks, and to a lesser extent, the U.S. equity market and the U.S. bond market. There will be that flight to quality trade. So if you look at April 6th, before the first ECB meeting where they raised rates, you had the 2-year Greek was at 16%, and the 10-year U.S. Treasury was close to 350. Then, over the course of that time, you had exactly an inverse relationship. So you had the 2-year Greek move up to 25, and you had the 10-year Treasury move as low as 310. So it's, you're going to see a flight to quality into treasuries, even though a lot of people would argue treasuries are really rich here.